I never thought I'd be the kind of person to tell a story like this. I'm practical. I study spreadsheets and sleep schedules. I don't believe in things I can't see. But something happened to me during my first semester at Hartwell University that I still think about at 2 in the morning when the apartment gets a little too quiet and the walls feel a little too close. It started with a room number. I arrived on campus 3 days before orientation. My parents had driven 6 hours to drop me off, and my mother cried exactly twice, once in the parking lot and once on the elevator. My father shook my hand like I was a business associate. I remember standing in the hallway of the 7th floor of Callaway Hall with a duffel bag on each shoulder, reading the numbers on the doors as I walked. 729, 731, 732, and then a gap. The door between 732 and 734 had no number on it, just a small rectangular smudge on the paint where a metal plate had clearly been removed at some point. The door itself was identical to every other door on the floor. Same beige, same brushed steel handle, same scuff marks at the base from years of luggage and boot heels, but it had no number. I stood in front of it for a few seconds, tilted my head, and then kept walking. My room was 736, end of the hall, corner unit, which I'd been told was a good thing. More wall space, one extra window. I didn't think about the missing number again for almost 2 weeks. The first month was ordinary in the way that first months are supposed to be. I met people, I ate dining hall food that tasted like recycled ambition, I studied too much and slept too little, and learned a layout of the building the way you learn any new place, slowly, in pieces, until it starts to feel like yours. My next-door neighbor on the left was a guy named Philip. Quiet, engineering student, always wearing the same gray hoodie. We had a polite arrangement. He didn't bother me, I didn't bother him, and we nodded at each other in the hallway with the particular dignity of people who share a thin wall. On the right side of my room was a storage closet, or at least that's what I assumed. There was a door in the wall, flush with the plaster, painted the same beige as everything else. No handle, just a small keyhole that had been painted over so many times it barely looked functional. I'd forgot about it. It was a Tuesday in late October when I first noticed the sound. I was sitting at my desk around 11 at night, working through a set of financial modeling problems, when I heard something through the right-hand wall. Not through the door, through the wall itself, a soft, dragging sound. Rhythmic, but not quite regular, like something being pulled slowly across a wooden floor. Once, a pause, then again. I stopped typing, sat completely still. It stopped too. I told myself it was pipes. Old buildings have sounds that don't make sense. I went back to my work. But somewhere under my concentration, I was listening, the way you listen when something has already made you uneasy without you being willing to admit it yet. I didn't hear it again that night, but I noticed that I'd started sleeping with the lamp on. A week later, I asked Philip in the hallway, casual as I could manage, what was on the other side of my right wall. He looked at me for just a moment longer than felt natural. "That's 733, he said. I told him I thought it was storage. He shrugged, but it wasn't the shrug of someone who didn't care. It was the shrug of someone who decided to stop caring. "It's been empty since before I got here," he said. "Since before any of us got here, I think." I asked him if he knew why. He pulled his hoodie tighter, said he had a lab to get to, and walked away. I found out the rest from a girl named Dara, who lived 2 doors down, and seemed to know everything about the building the way certain people know everything about the places they inhabit, almost against their will. She told me quietly, standing by the elevator, that 733 had been taken off the room roster about 4 years ago. She said there had been incidents. She used that word, incidents, and left it hollow. When I pushed, she said there had been 2 students, different years, different circumstances, who had both requested to be moved out of 733 mid-semester. One of them had been hospitalized. The other had simply disappeared from the university's records entirely, which was strange enough on its own, but stranger was the fact that nobody seemed to question it at the time. She said the room was now listed as a maintenance access point, though she had never seen anyone go in or come out. I nodded like this was satisfying information, walked back to my room, sat on my bed for a long time without turning on any lights. I want to be clear about something. I wasn't scared in any dramatic sense. I wasn't jumping at shadows or lying awake shaking. What I was aware. There's a particular kind of discomfort that doesn't announce itself. It just settles into you like a temperature change you don't notice until you realize you've been cold for an hour. I had started noticing things that individually meant nothing. The way the air near my right wall sometimes felt slightly different. Not cold exactly, but denser, like the atmospheric pressure was fractionally off. The smell, twice, of something faintly chemical that came and went before I could identify it. The fact that I kept waking up at the same time, not every night, but often enough that I started checking my phone when I opened my eyes, and it was almost always somewhere between 2:40 and 3:05 in the morning. And then there was the scratching, not dragging like before, scratching like a fingernail drawn slowly and deliberately on the inside surface of the wall. I heard it 3 times over the course of 2 weeks, always at night, always stopping the moment I moved. I told myself, old building, rodents maybe, steam pipes, wood contracting in the cold. I told myself this with the repetitive confidence of someone who needs very badly to believe something. The night everything shifted, it was a Wednesday. I know it was a Wednesday because I remember thinking I had an 8 a.m. lecture and that I needed to be asleep by midnight. I remember that specifically because it was such a normal, practical thought to be having when everything that had been quietly accumulating in the back of my mind finally broke through. I was at my desk. It was just past 11. I was writing notes by hand. I preferred it that way for certain subjects. When I heard it again, the scratching, same wall, but longer this time and slower. And then, underneath it, something I hadn't heard before. A sound that I've spent months trying to find the right word for. Not knocking, not speaking, something between the two. A low, rhythmic vibration that I felt in my chest before I fully registered it with my ears. I stopped breathing. It continued for about 15 seconds, maybe less, then silence. And then, and I want to be precise about this because it is the part I have returned to most often, the door in my wall moved. Not opened, not swung, it moved. A shift of maybe a centimeter, maybe less. Just enough that the thin line of darkness at its edge changed shape slightly. Just enough that the painted-over keyhole caught the light differently. I was standing without having decided to stand. My chair was behind me. My notes were on the desk. I was staring at the door. Nothing else happened. I stood there for what I think was 2 or 3 minutes. The door did not move again. The sound did not return. The air in the room was just air. I picked up my keys, my phone, and my jacket, and I left. I walked to the 24-hour study lounge on the 3rd floor and sat in a plastic chair under fluorescent lights and did not go back to my room until the sun was fully up. I requested a room transfer the next morning. The housing office told me there was nothing available until January. I said I understood. I thanked them. I moved my desk to the opposite wall. I pushed my wardrobe in front of the door, not because I thought this would do anything, but because I needed to make a decision with my hands, needed to put something physical between myself and whatever it was I was feeling. I didn't hear the scratching again after that. The sound stopped, the smell stopped, even the waking at 2:40 in the morning gradually tapered off, though it took several weeks. At the end of November, I was told a maintenance crew had done some work in the sealed rooms on the 7th floor. I never found out what kind of work, or whether it had anything to do with anything. The person who told me said it casually, the way you mentioned that a light bulb has been replaced. I moved rooms in January, a different floor, a different wing. Nothing unusual has happened since. But I think about 733 sometimes. I think about the 2 students who left and never really explained why. I think about the door that moved and the sound that felt like it was meant to be felt rather than heard, and the fact that whatever was in that wall, whether it was pipes or pressure or something else entirely, it always stopped the moment I moved. That's the part that stays with me. It stopped when I moved, which means on some level, it knew I was there. And if it knew I was there, I've always wondered, quietly, in the way I allow myself to wonder things I don't want full answers to, what it was waiting for.